Hi there. This is Frater IAC coming to you with a brand new video after a hiatus. So, this video, and actually, this is ultimately going to be a set of several videos, we're going to explore praying the Rosary from a Hermetic point of view. So, why? Well, one of our colleagues, our Hermetic colleagues in this community, um, messaged me and said, he put a comment, Lucius Movina, and he said, Frater IAC, a YouTube video on your rosary meditations would be very interesting. I also pray it, and ever since Virgil talked openly about it, I have noticed lots of magicians pray it as well. I don't know. I mean, I do it every day and have since I read Marian Hermetics. And, just a word on Virgil. I've always been a solitary practitioner, but that does not mean I don't often work with others in the field. And I also read a whole lot. And I've had teachers both living and dead. So Virgil was instrumental in getting me through steps one and two. Because honestly, I was about to give up. And, this is. It requires a lot of discipline and it requires a sustained effort over an extended period of time. That's just the way it is. So anyway, Virgil, I think in 2024, early 2024, he released through Tanya Robinson, Falcon Books, he released Marian Hermetics. And of course, I got it right away when it came out because I like Virgil. And so I read it and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And this was extremely helpful. And I have prayed the rosary every day, no matter what, since Valentine's Day of 2024. And that's a whole nother story. But it has done wonders for me in terms of my own ascent. Okay. So I'm gonna, do these videos, depending on how they're received. I don't know if everybody's gonna like them. This may or may not be for you. And I'm gonna repeat this, but I'll say it now. Okay. Every single person in this world was given a specific set of talents on loan by divine providence for this incarnation, and they have been presented with people and situations where they can move forward to fulfill their soul contract this time around the wheel or not. It's always your choice. And so all of us are going to be different. And so I'm going to tell you how I do this. Okay. You don't have to do it my way. And I want to tell you right off the bat, this is not going to be a theological set of videos. I'm not going there. Okay. What we're going to be doing instead is exploring the rosary and its mysteries, as I said, from a Hermetic point of view. See, because look at this picture, bunch of guys standing there with swords and muskets and giant pikes and a bunch of dead people and dead horses. And that's, you got one bunch of guys that is absolutely certain that they're correct about a thing, and you got another bunch of guys that are equally certain that they're correct about that same thing, and then there's wars. And these soldiers are from the 30 Years' War, which was between 1618 and 1648, and it was fought over theology. Okay. I mean, we fought wars over transubstantiation. We fought wars over indulgence. We fought wars over all kinds of ideologies. Okay, let's not go down that rabbit hole because what we're talking about here is inner spiritual development, the spiritual ascent. And that's going to look a little bit different for every single person. So, that said, um, I speaking for myself, um, I was born into a family that has roots in a number of different sects or denominations of Christianity. My parents liked Ernest Holmes, and Ernest Holmes was a New Thought guy, and he believed in scientific prayer, and he wrote a book, in fact, called The Science of Mind. And in that, he explores how to do affirmative prayer, which is a form of prayer. And I mean, my ancestors on my father's side were Irish Catholic peasants who grew potatoes. Seriously. And I've got other ancestors who were Orangemen, Protestant Irish and Scots Irish. Then I have others who were Anglican. I have others who were Methodist Episcopalian, and my grandfather on my mother's side, my maternal grandfather, was a very, very powerful conjurer, but he never would have called it that. He learned his stuff in the hills in Arkansas, but in terms of religion, he was a member in very good standing of the Church of Christ. And, he was a serious holy roller. So if I were to choose a denomination of Christianity, I would almost certainly choose the Greek Orthodox. And the reason that I would is I love their concept of set, mindset, and setting, like the liturgies. Okay. So they have a concept and they call it phronema. And it's a Greek term that translates to mind, spirit, or mentality, but it's about the mindset that you have. It's a way of thinking, a worldview that influences every part of your life. And basically, the objective of the Greek Orthodox is to achieve a state of connectedness with God that is called theosis. I love that because if you'll recall, Franz Barton specifically states in his initiation into Hermetics that the actual objective of this initiatory path is connecting with the Godhead. Magic, this thing we call magic. We all want to be a powerful magus, and we get into this because we want to be a powerful magus. But then, after we make the effort, the sustained effort over the extended period of time, we realize that the what we're actually shooting for is connecting, first of all, awakening the higher self, the monad, and then remembering the connectedness of our higher self with all of the other monads, which are part of God. At least that's how I see it. So, I put this book cover on there because it's me. Okay. I love books. I read all the time. But, okay. So, Stylianus Etesius, he was a Cypriot, and he was born in 1919. He lived concurrently with Franz Barton, and he was a magus. I think he was an adept, like Barton was, but he was Greek Orthodox, and he did energy healing like Barton did, and people came from all over the world. He was called the Magus of Strovolos. Um, but he wrote books, and his basic theory is in esoteric teachings, a Christian approach to truth, and his group of followers is called the seekers of truth, and they're still around. Unfortunately, this book has been out of print a long time, and it's dramatically overpriced on Amazon. But I bought it a number of years ago, as a part of my own ascent, and it's got some really interesting stuff in there. So if you can get it on an intra-library loan. Okay, so you can read the book and then give it back. So you don't have to spend like over $200 on a paperback. Good thing. Okay, so anyway, enough of that. Uh, Pranama, the mindset. Ah. So now let's talk about the rosary basics, okay? This is a rosary. It came from Pixabay, I think, which I really like Pixabay a lot because you never run afoul of copyright. So anyway, let's just talk about the basics of the rosary, right? So you start with this crucifix, okay? And the cross has much symbolism, which we will get into in this video, actually. Then it's got the pendant, which is two Our Father beads and three Hail Mary beads, right? Because the Our Fathers are this red color and the Hail Marys are this brown color, right? And you have that, and then you have this loop, and the loop is developed, it's 5 decades. Okay, so there's 10 of these Hail Mary beads in each decade. That's why they call it a decade. It's got 10 beads, right? So, and then that's punctuated by the Our Father. And so essentially what you do is you cross yourself, then you say an Our Father, you say three Hail Marys, then you announce the mystery that you're going to be meditating on in that rosary. And traditionally, there are three sets of mysteries that you meditate on. And each of these mysteries, there are the joyful mysteries, there are 5 of those. Then there are the sorrowful mysteries, there are 5 of those. And then there are the glorious mysteries, and there are 5 of those. Why? 5, 5, 5 times 10 times 10 times 10, 150, because there are 150 Psalms. And when the Rosary was developed, the legend has it that the Virgin Mary appeared to this guy. I think his name was Dominic. And Dominic, she gave him the rosary and she said, pray this every day, share this with people. And the reason, but a lot of people, theologians, believe that the rosary developed over centuries because most of the people were illiterate. And so they had these prayer beads and they were taught these rote prayers and these mysteries to meditate on so that illiterate people could actually connect with the Spirit of God through these meditations. Because the rosary is basically a mala, it's a prayer beads. And these rote prayers are a form of mantra. I mean, this transcends the Christian faith, and it goes across the board. This use of beads, and Barton even recommends it in Initiation into Hermetics that you're going to use these beads at first to keep account. So I had a rosary anyway when I read Virgil's Marian Hermetics because I that's how I used it. But then I started praying the rosary every day. And it really has made a difference in my spiritual ascent. So anyway, that's what you do. So you're going around and each decade you're meditating on one of the mysteries, right? And so like for instance, if we take the joyful mysteries, the first mystery is the Annunciation, when the Archangel Gabriel came to the 15-year-old Virgin Mary and said, hey, the Holy Spirit is going to impregnate you, and you're going to have the Savior, and you're full of grace, and you're blessed above all other women, and the fruit of your womb, Jesus, will be blessed. And Mary was like, okay. And so that's the first mystery. The second mystery is the visitation, when Mary, the pregnant Mary, visited her cousin Elizabeth, who was a middle-aged woman who was pregnant with John the Baptist, who was said to be Jesus's cousin, right? So Mary visits Elizabeth, and the two fetuses apparently recognize each other in the womb, and they're delighted to see each other because they become lifelong friends. and or so they say. And then the third joyful mystery is the nativity, the birth of Christ. And legend has it in the manger, right? And that's because when Christ is born in you, it has to compete. The Christ seed has to compete with the animal tendencies. Aha, that's the metaphorical truth there. And then, of course, the next thing is the presentation of baby Jesus at the temple, and then you have young Jesus teaching in the temple. Now, uh, in 2002, Pope John Paul introduced a fourth set of mysteries, the luminous mysteries. And when I talk about those, I'm going to talk about what Paul wrote. Um, Gosh, I think it's in Romans or Ephesians or one of the books. I'll have researched it thoroughly before I do that video. But Paul said there's different kinds of, everybody's got different gifts in the Spirit. And one of those gifts he talks about is workers of miracles. Ha ha ha, that would be us, the Hermetic initiates. So, anyway, that's what the basics of the Rosary look like to you on the ground when you're getting started. And later I'll talk about how you go about praying it. And in fact, let's talk about that now. Um, I know this slide is very busy because the Rosary, there are volumes and volumes about how to pray the Rosary, and everybody's got kind of a different take on it, even in the Catholic Church. There's all kinds of different prayers that can be used, and so on. The What I'm trying to do here is give you the basics, okay? This is how the Catholics do it, all right? So they start by making the sign of the cross. They pray the Apostles' Creed. Then they pray the Our Father, three Hail Marys. They announce the mystery. They pray Our Father. Then they go and they pray 10 Hail Marys, say Amen, a Glory Be, and a Fatima prayer. They announce the second mystery right around the loop. And then this last piece, which we saw here, is called the centerpiece. This last deal is where you say a Hail Holy Queen and a Rosary prayer, and then you finish with the making the sign of the cross, and you can end it off. Some people end it off with a Glory Be. I ended off with a Glory Be. So what I recommend to you is, if you want to do this, read what Virgil says in Marian Hermetics because he is a Hermetic initiate, all right? Then read some of the things that the Catholics have put out on how to pray the Rosary and then do it. Now, I had a professor in graduate school years ago, decades ago, when dinosaurs roamed the earth. I was in graduate school learning about counseling psychology. And I had this professor who taught the theory class. So we looked at all of the psychological theories from, Freud and Carl Jung and Adler and Fritz Perls and all those guys, right? And we looked and we had to do work around each of those theories, and we would look at cases, mental health counseling cases, and we would apply each theory in turn. Well, at the end of the course, the professor kind of leaned back and said, okay, now I'm going to tell you something from the heart. He said, look, all of these theories work. Every single theory that you have learned in this class works. They work just fine. And so he said, pick one and get really good at it. And then you can branch out and become eclectic. But if you try to become eclectic right off the bat, you're going to be like the difference between an artist like Monet, who was trained formally in art before he went into Impressionism. Okay, but he knows the basics. Same with Picasso. He did the surreal thing. He was formally trained. He could do something like the Night Watch. You know, but he chose to express his art in a different way. He became eclectic, and that's how the professor told it to us. right? So if you are going to do this, I would recommend you start doing it and learn how to do it using this method the way the Catholics do it. And if you're wondering what this deal is in the center, it's called a combuskini because the Greek Orthodox, have their own way of praying the Rosary. And it's different from how the Catholics do it. I have a combuskini, but I pray the Rosary uh, in kind of a modified way. And we'll get to why that is actually in the next set of slides. So, but I recommend if you, again, this is the basics of how you're going to do it. And here are the prayers. Learn how to do it this way. Do that first. And what's going to happen to you, though, is everybody's different. And we all have our own soul contracts, our own things that we're trying to learn in this incarnation or not. We always have the choice. And so this path, ultimately, what's going to happen to you is probably the same thing that happened with me. Because I'm praying this thing, the way the Catholics do it. And I did that for about a month. And then I started feeling uncomfortable with some of these prayers because they didn't match, how I look at it, how I have learned in my own ascent, and connectedness with the Logos, because the Logos is my Godhead. So anyway, um, let's take a brief foray into cosmology. Look at this giant thing on the left-hand side. Oh my goodness, it's the tree of life. And I love this particular one, even though it's really busy, but it comes from Wikipedia. You got the three pillars, the pillar of mildness in the center. You got Boaz and Yachin. You've got the different Sephira, and this is the path up the tree of life. And this is a complete cosmology. And okay, the concept I want to bring forth here, okay, because I read the tarot. I love the tarot. The tarot is considered a book of life, right? The tree of life, the Kabbalah, is considered a book of life. The mysteries of the Rosary are considered a book of life. The Buddhist Eightfold Path, book of life. See what I'm saying? So there are, a number of paths up to connectedness with the Godhead, but these are the same energies. Whatever you call them, whatever nomenclature you choose to use, they're the same energies. So let's talk a little bit more closely about what this means. And I warn you right now, some of the things I say may very well make you feel uncomfortable. But there are new ways maybe of thinking about these things. All right? So these are the energies that you're going to be working with when you pray the rosary, if you pray it intelligently. And we're going to talk about intelligent prayer on subsequent slides, so hold that thought. But let's look at this, all right? So you go through, in other videos, I've talked about the 30-second path, the path of Tao, which is the tarot card, the world. And it shows that woman who is in the center. She's floating in the Akasha because she has mastered each of the elemental forces within herself and can now wield them externally. And she's at Yesod, which is not pictured here, but in the last slide, here's Malkuth. That's where everyone starts. You take the 30-second path up to Yesod because you can't do magic until you get here because you're looking at the archetypes. This is the soul and this is the mind, and you begin working this, and ultimately you get to Tiferet. Okay, Tiferet is beauty. And I don't know if you've watched a lot of the YouTube videos that Alan Watts, so it wasn't Alan Watts. He did a bunch of lectures. He was at the Esalen Institute for a while, but he was very spiritually aware. he had connected with divine providence. And there's a whole bunch of videos on YouTube where he's talking about that with recorded lectures that he presumably gave at the Esalen Institute. So he talks about the connectedness and what that looks like. And, you know, he talks about how when he became connected with the Godhead, he literally thought he was going crazy. Because what happens, he says, when you connect with the Godhead, is that your individual ego, your ego identity, your little I ego that just cares about the materialist aspects of this earth. You know, what am I going to eat today? How is my body comfortable? Do I have lots of gold around? You know, that kind of stuff, you know. And he says that when you connect with the Godhead, that entire part of you shatters. It goes out the window, and you're sitting there now connected to your higher self, and it's disconcerting. And if you've read Bernadette Peters, she wrote books about what that is like as well, connectedness with the Godhead. So you can read Bernadette Peters. You can listen to Alan Watts. There are some books about that. But the point is, your higher self can't be in charge unless you actually have mastered the soul mirrors and done active introspection to where you are at the level of Tiferet or beauty. And so that's Yod He Vav He Aloha Va Adat in the Golden Dawn parlance, but God made manifest in the sphere of mind. Okay, this is your astrosome becoming completely pure and completely transparent, so that then you can fly up this abyss and you can meet. You gain knowledge, and ultimately you connect as the higher self with the Insof, which is God. Okay, and so the Insof is the source. I think of it as the quantum field, and later in a later slide, we're going to be talking about the Lord's Prayer or the Our Father in the way it translates from Aramaic, which is how Jesus spoke it. Okay, so we'll hold that thought. We're going to get to that later, but you got to be completely pure, which is why I'm such a big believer in active introspection, right? Um, and that means that purity in body, so good health, good exercise, all that. Purity in soul, having transmuted your vices into virtues, and purity in mind. So ultimately, when you get to Tiferet, you are able to exercise complete control over what you allow yourself to feel, think, say, and do. That's mandatory because you, even the uninitiated, are incredibly powerful. And I've talked about that in earlier videos, and so I'm not going to belabor it, but Tiferet is the state of being in control of that because it's the bridge. Dot is actually the bridge between your higher self, your monad, which should be driving your show. That's how sacred magic is done. The spirit, the monad, which is already connected with God and has been all along. You just have to remember that. And Tiferet allows you to empty this ego self out so that you can go into that remembrance and then, start performing sacred magic. Okay, so enough of that. Now Tiferet is the utterly pure body, soul, and mind. Okay, so now Dot is the bridge between the body and the astrosome, okay, and the monad. Because I'll tell you what, if you, according to Alan Watts, if you wake up spiritually and become spiritually aware, at first you're a quivering mass of jello that's like insane because your monad cannot function in this dense material plane constrained by space and time unless you have a very strong and pure astrosome and body so that can be a bridge to where the intent of the higher self can then manifest through your magic. I suppose that's a good way to look at it. But then, and this is going to make you uncomfortable. Oh, yes, it will. Um, I've always looked at this is called the supernal triad. This top three. Okay, Kether is the crown. I am who I am. This is the burning bush, you know. Metatron, the holy living creatures, union with God, attainment. This is theosis, okay, and it's the first swirlings. Oh, interesting. And there's a lot to that. But that's Kether. That's the crown. That is the connection with the Insof, which is the source, the quantum. And later I've got a slide that kind of shows you as above, so below. But hold that thought. So now, Chokhmah is wisdom. Yah, the Lord, Ratziel, the vision of God. It's also the male creative force, or the logos, or so I have always thought of it, because I've read a whole bunch of books about the tree of life, and I concluded that Chokhmah is that male creative force, and Binah is the female receptive force. So Yod He Vav He Elohim, Safkiel, it's a vision of sorrow. It's the pillar of severity. It is I mean, the male creative force plants a seed, and the female receptive force, the seed grows. And then, of course, it becomes Chesed, Geburah, Tiferet, Netzach, Had, so on. But that's kind of how it looks. But, uh-oh, we've got a problem here. The macho men, the girly girl women. Uh-uh. Because wisdom, Chokhmah is titled wisdom. The Gnostics considered wisdom Sophia, which is the female. It's female. It's it's wisdom, Sophia, and that's bizarre. And look down here, we have the word animus. That's one of the reasons I chose to use this image, because in Carl Jung, his idea, he was a psychologist, but I believe he was also a Hermetic initiate. Jung said, hey, okay, if you're a man, you've got to connect with the female essence within yourself as well in order to be complete. And he called this completeness individuation. And there's another mystical name for it that was coined by Joseph Campbell. But essentially, by putting wisdom here with this logos, what is being told to us here in the context of the tree of life is that this has elements of both male and female, and this has elements of both female and male, because we see here the anima. All right. So, but wait, there's a masculine element here because it's Saturn, father time. And so here we have the Christ, the Logos, and we have the female aspect of that, which is Sophia or wisdom. Then we have the female, the female receptive force, Mother Mary. Okay, but we also have Saturn, the Lord of Time, the laws of this earth. Interesting. And of course, then here, this is the zodiac, and then here is the planet Saturn, because these all have planetary, with the exception of this, these all have planetary kinds of associations, right? So interesting. So if that, hopefully that didn't make you feel too uncomfortable, because you have to get in touch, whether you're a man or a woman, or you're non-binary or whatever, okay, you have to get in touch with both the male creative force and the female receptive force within you. And that's called, Joseph Campbell called that the divine marriage, the Hieros Gamos. Okay. And that's a whole nother thing. But I do recommend reading Joseph Campbell. It's dense reading, but it's very, very good. And in fact, George Lucas, when he was doing the movies about Star Wars, he had Joseph Campbell as a guest in Lucas Ranch to make sure that in the New Hope he was getting the images right. And of course, you've got the Indiana Jones, the Temple of Doom, you've got Lord of the Rings. Those are very, very high aspects of mythology and symbolism. So interesting how this is. So that's what we have. Now, oh my goodness, as below, so above. Oh my goodness, we're back at the Emerald Tablets, okay, of Hermes Trismegistus. And look at these images, all right? These are your brain synapses. This is how this is how the nervous system looks in your brain, the synapses, okay, that run these electrical uh, waves to the various parts of your body to run the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. That's how it looks under, like extreme magnification. Oh my gosh, cosmic strings, look at that. This is how the stars look. This is the fabric of the universe. As below, so above, as above, so below. Wow. All right. And this has meaning. The reason I'm putting this slide in here, because you're probably rolling your eyes and saying, what the heck? This is supposed to be about the rosary. Well, when you're praying the Lord's Prayer or the Our Father, you're talking about as above, so below. And we'll get to that in a moment. But there's one other thing. Uh, this comes from an increased understanding, in the later steps of the initiatory path, and certainly beyond, when you're working with the planetary circles and the letters, you're learning some stuff. Okay, and so this is the outward flow of creative energy from source. Okay, here's you in this is your body in this dense material plane, right? Then you have your astral body, then you have your multiple thought dimensions, and you go clear out here to the soul, which is pure awareness. In other words, you are a multi-dimensional being, and you are much, much larger and more all inclusive than just your body. And most of the uninitiated, most people think of themselves as their body. Not so. You have a body, you've got a soul, you've got a mind, and then you've got various causal bodies that take you up to the monad, which is the higher self, right? That's just kind of the way it is. Now, I wanted to talk about this, and this is probably a whole nother set of videos, but the inner temple, the depth point, the transfer of consciousness, these are skills you've absolutely got to have to advance in this. And of course, the rosary and meditating on the mysteries can help you in this. So there is a method to this madness, but I got a kick out of in unlocking the keys to magic, which Tanya Robinson and Falcon Books published with a set of interviews from practitioners in the Barden community. Um, and Bob Smith, who has 60 skills on Perseus Arcane Academy, Bob has 3 chapters in there, and so he's talking about how he goes to the depth point, and I thought that was really great because he talks about being in free fall because of course he has a military background, so he's parachuted out of planes, and so this is the free fall. So he imagines going to the depth point, and that's in the solar plexus, okay? And you fall, and you go into free fall, and he lands on top of a hill and makes an Akashic wall in front of him, and then he projects through that Akashic wall to wherever he wants to go. I've done it a little differently because years and years ago, like this book came out like in 2001, I think, and so in that first decade of this century, I think I read this book, and this is Christopher Penczak, and he's a witch, and his mother trained him, which I like him already, because my mother taught me a lot of really useful stuff. So his mother trained him in the strega tradition, the Italian witchcraft. And so he wrote a book called The Inner Temple of Witchcraft. That grew into an 11-volume set. This is his first one. But he talks about how to create an inner temple. Fascinating, right? And so I created an inner temple a long time ago, and I have built that temple brick by brick as I've gone through Barton's initiatory path. And mine kind of looks like this, kind of just a basic Greek temple, the Parthenon. That's how I envision it. But I land inside in its inner part, and I'm in the center of the four pillars of the inner temple, which are the pillar of volition, courage, knowledge, and silence. Okay, and I start there, and then I will go wherever I want, because in this inner temple there are portals to different places. And later on in your initiatory path, you are going to learn how to travel mentally and astrally. And so Robert Monroe was an amazing, there are some others that came earlier than Monroe, but Monroe was a very interesting guy. He mapped the astral realm. And I want to talk to you about that because there's a place where you can connect with your past lives, all of the past incarnations that you have lived. And there are a couple of letters, I and Z, in Key to the True Kabbalah, where you can actually connect with those memories without worrying about the negative karma or positive karma that came from each of these incarnations. You can simply tap into those skills that you had before. And Monroe wrote about that in Far Journeys. There's another guy named William Bullman, who wrote about that too. And so and there's a whole community out there, HemiSync and so on, about astral travel, which is an aspect of the Hermetic initiatory path. So that's what you've got before you. And so now let's go back to the Rosary with kind of that wider understanding or broader understanding of cosmology, because that's important moving forward. Because when we start talking about the mysteries, again, I told you it is a book of life. So, first of all, I have modified the way I pray the Rosary. I started out praying it exactly the way the Catholics pray it, but then I made some minor modifications so that my practice is still the Rosary, but it's the Rosary as it sings in my heart. Okay, so I start off with what I call the prayer of intent. And I told you earlier, I'm a big believer in scientific prayer. So this is my actual prayer of intent. And I say this after I have crossed myself and dedicated the rosary to the great work, because I usually dedicate the rosary to the great work, to being a guardian of the heart, to providing good and loving service to the life and soul of humanity. That's my magical mission, if you will. And so this little fella here on the side has the chakras. And I created this scientific prayer to run energy from the base or root chakra all the way up and out the crown. And then, come down with protection, because when I travel into spirit realms and so on, I want to make sure that I'm protected. And so I have a magic ring that I have charged very strongly with this intent of the full armor of God. So basically, here's the prayer. Um, I start off with crucifying my ego self, my little I ego, and inviting the monad, the higher self, to live in me, and connect with the logos. I am pure and humble without fear or attachment. In the stillness, we are one. That is the sense of safety in the root chakra. Then I talk about feeling with your compassion, sacral, working with your will, the solar plexus, speaking with your word, the throat, and breathing the breath of life. Because the mental body is fed by sensory input from your five senses. Okay? The soul, the feeling body, the astral body, is fed through breath. Then I perceive with your senses, that's the ajna or third eye chakra, right? And then the light of the kingdom shines forth from me, that's the crown chakra. And here's a rainbow body, and that shines forth from me and blesses all creation. That's the prayer. And then I bring in the full armor of God, which is the helmet, the shoes, the breastplate, the belt, the shield, and the sword. That's when I have my hands on that cross, when I'm just starting to pray the rosary, this is the prayer I use. It is a scientific prayer that runs energy through your body. And then, of course, the prayers I actually use, the Our Father, Jesus, prayed this and taught his disciples how to pray in Aramaic. And in Aramaic, the first line of the Lord's Prayer is Abund B'Shmaya, which is our our Father, informal Father, Dad, Dad, who is everywhere. And that gives you that's the Insof, that's the uncreated, that is the God that in Isaiah is said to not think your thoughts because it can't. It's everything. It's uncreated. It's always been. It has no end in space or time. It's essentially the quantum field, which Deepak Chopra called the field of pure potentiality. Just, that's God. And so when you connect with the Godhead, you have a portal to create in the mental realm, the astral realm, and then manifest that in the physical realm in the form of what Valentin Tomberg calls sacred magic. Okay, and I'm going through a lot of stuff, so it's cool because put comments in. My email is frateriac@gmail.com. If you got any questions, email me, and I can elaborate. Um, but I'm not going to argue theology with you because this is mine. This is how I do it. I don't apologize for it. And I'm not going to be told I'm wrong by somebody who's equally certain that their way is the only way and my way is the only way. Well, I don't do that because we're all different. Remember that. And then the Hail Mary uh, is and last thing on the Lord's Prayer. I don't think I suppose God can lead you into temptation because in Exodus we have God hardening the heart of the Pharaoh. But, you know, that's the great dichotomy. You can either learn through the passive path of the elements, the materialism, which is the path of suffering, or you can learn through this path, the path of initiation, which has much less suffering. Either or, and both are sacred. So then the Hail Mary, full of grace, Lord is with thee. Here is Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for all of us now and at the hour of death. Because guess what? If I want God's mercy for me, I have to want it for you. I have to want it for everybody, no matter how odious their behavior may be. I have to want it for everybody. And then the glory be, I modified a little bit because glory be to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, as it has always been, because the traditional glory be is as it was in the beginning, but God doesn't have a beginning. So I modified it as it has always been, is now, ever shall be, world without end. Okay, so that's how I do it. So now, um, let's try it, you know? And I'm not going to pray the whole rosary because, we don't have that kind of time on this video because I'm already running along. But I start off with my prayer of intent. I do an Our Father. I do 3 Hail Marys in the pendant part of the rosary. Then I announce the mystery that I'm going to meditate on. I say an Our Father. Then I do the decade of Hail Marys. Then I say Amen. I do not say Amen after each Hail Mary. Then I announce the second mystery of that set of mysteries, and then do an Our Father, and then go right around the loop. And then in the end here, I will do a psalm because the psalms are extremely powerful, and they too are a book of life. And psalms are also used quite a bit in magic, certainly in Hermetic magic and also in conjure. There is a real use of Psalms. And so what I have done is every day I pray the rosary, I say the Psalm, whatever Psalm of the day in order. So I go through the entire 150 Psalms in more than 150 days because Psalm 119 is subdivided into a whole bunch of parts based on the Hebrew alphabet. So, it's more than 150. But, as you go through and pray the rosary every day, I do a different psalm each day on that ascent, starting with Psalm 1 and ending with Psalm 150. And then I, cross myself and I say the blessed be prayer, and then I'm done. Um, So there it is. Now, in the next 3 videos, actually 4, I don't know why I put 3 here. We're going to talk about the three. Oh, that's why. We're going to talk about the 3 traditional mysteries: joyful, sorrowful, and glorious. And the new 4th set is going to be in a 4th video, which I'm going to talk about the luminous mysteries, which is us, the workers of miracles. Anyway, may all of you be blessed in the ways that you most need to be blessed. Farewell until the next video. Don't count on one a week because I don't have that kind of time, but I'll do these as I can. Warm regards.